Mike Petralia, Trags, back with you on the Jungle Roar podcast. As always, powered by CLNS Media and our great friends at Prize Picks. Back here on this episode with Richard Skinner, Skinny of Local 12, covering all things Cincinnati Bengals for Local12.com. The offseason, Skinny, is certainly going to be a busy one. That's not breaking news at all. But there was some breaking news on Monday, as James Rapien of SI.com and BengalsTalk.com was the first to report that indeed the Bengals are expected when the tag window opens on Tuesday, and we don't know exactly when they might place the tag on them, but they are expected to tag star wide receiver Tee Higgins. My question for you, Skinny, is what does this mean going forward? Does it mean that possibly a tag and trade is in the works, or does it mean they are just playing their hand like you would expect them to and still going to work aggressively to re-sign Tee Higgins to an extension?
Yeah, I think it's the logical move, and I think it still means all options are on the table. So what this means is obviously that the Bengals can continue to negotiate with Tee Higgins until mid-July for a contract extension. They can choose to try to have him play on the franchise tag. That becomes his choice then. Of course, he doesn't get paid if he doesn't play, so you'd assume he's still going to play, maybe not happy. And it gives you the opportunity then as well, to your point, to then if you just the sides have all broken down and this is just heading acrimoniously and you think you can get some value and some value is offered for him in a trade, then you can do that. So I think this was the logical move. I mean, they were going to have to make a decision on a contract one way or another with Tee Higgins probably before free agency struck, because you need to know what direction you go in free agency. If you can't get Tee Higgins signed, well, what direction do you get? Well, you still have the option to keep him on your roster for 2025 via the franchise tag. It also, again, allows you to continue to negotiate. It also then allows you to get some value in return. I don't think there was ever a world, Mike, and I think you'd agree with this, where the Bengals were just going to let him walk to free agency. I mean, that would have been silly. I mean, the best you get out of that's a third-round compensatory pick, and that still may not even be the case. It may cancel each other out depending on what you go sign in free agency. So I don't think there was ever a world of that. I don't think I'd be a Bengals fan and panic and go, well, the sides are miles apart. They could be. But it also could mean that they're close enough that they think, all right, let's just get this procedural act done. And let's see if we can then close it in. Kidding. So, yes, yeah.
I think it's a procedural act, but I do not see a world in which Tee Higgins plays on this tag contract. I just don't, for whatever reason, I don't see him playing again. Now, maybe he decides, hey, I want to run it back one more year with Jamar and Joe and see how it turns out. And maybe I do get a Super Bowl ring or a chance to head deep into the playoffs with a quarterback that I really love playing with, and a wide receiver that he's not only good friends with off the field but has incredible rapport with on the field. Maybe it is as simple as that, but I got to think Rocky Arsenault and his representation would tell him, you take the guaranteed money if you can get it now, rather than just playing on a one-year franchise tag.
Yeah, and again, I think the key question here, and none of us know the answer to this. The only one that does is Rocky Arsenault, the agent, and I guess T to some degree in the process of what is the market value for Tee Higgins. Is it so exorbitant that the Bengals wouldn't be prudent to pay that? I know every fan's going to scream at me and go, pay him what if he's asking for $33 million a year? Is that market value for Tee Higgins? I don't know if that, again, I spitballing here because I don't know where the figures are. Nobody knows where the figures are. I hope it's the case where the Bengals aren't lowballing him, then shame on the Bengals for that. But if it's a price tag where the agent in his mind believes he can go get north of 30 mil on the open market, and maybe he can. But if you're the Bengals, it's no, we're just not going to do that. I mean, we're not going to roll the dice on a guy who's missed 5 games each of the last 2 years and pay him that kind of money when we're about to pay the other wide receiver this kind of money. So it's a delicate situation. But the thing to it is, you could get him back for 2025. It's by the rules. You can have him play on the franchise tag. And for those that'll think, well, he's not going to play. He's going to, again, if he wants to get paid next season, he's going to have to perform. And listen, he performed great this year in the 12 games he played. The problem is he didn't play in 5 games. And so it's a fine line. I honestly, I know the Bengals come out as the bad guy in everything. And to some degree that some parts that is true. If they are truly lowballing here, well, then shame on them for that. But if they're in a decent neighborhood, and there's a negotiating window where, listen, agent's going to throw out a price, Bengals throw out a price, hopefully they talk. Hopefully that's where you're at with this. But I think in fairness to the Bengals, I'm not just going to throw money willy-nilly just because he says this is what I want.
Well, here's my take on all of that. First of all, some business out of the way. The franchise tag number for wide receivers for 2025 is 23 point, let's round up, $6 million for the coming season. It was 21.8 this year. So that 23.6 would be fully guaranteed. That would count against the cap.
But he gets more than that. He's going to get more than that, actually, because he's gotten tagged twice. You get more for the second tag. I think he's going to be around 25 mil for that second tag, Mike.
Okay, thanks for correcting that, Skinny. Yeah. I did not know that. Okay, so there, 20. Let's say, well, let's call it 25 million.
Yeah.
So that is a great number for T, guaranteed money, fully guaranteed. But it's only 1 year, and it's a raise of almost $3.2 million from last season. The thing I always caution fans about when they read reports about negotiations between the team and the player in this particular situation is you have no idea of the depths of the complexity of the contract and how many years are fully guaranteed, what the guaranteed money is, first of all. And that, to me, is what it comes down to much more than what the AAV is. Now, Skinny, you feel free to jump in here and disagree with me if you please, and if that's how you feel. But I believe that the Bengals are trying to work out the cash to get all of them paid. That is really the sticking point for the Bengals. Do they have enough cash to get T done, to get Jamar done, obviously, and how much of that comes from the Joe Burrow till that Joe Burrow is willing to give up, at least on the front end. He'll obviously get paid in the long term, but how much is Joe Burrow willing to give up now to get those two players signed?
Yeah, and to the complexity of all that, Mike, is to your point, Joe understands fully well he's going to have to restructure his contract. He even literally admitted the different ways he would have to restructure in a podcast last week, I think, with Barstool Sports. And one of those is converting some of the guaranteed money into signing bonus money that you can then prorate over the life of a contract. I'm not going to get in the weeds of this. Fans who are watching this are deep-rooted Bengals fans. They know enough about how this stuff works. So that's part of it, the complexity of involving Jamar in it. So you're juggling, excuse me, and also Trey, you're juggling almost 4 contracts into one negotiating part here, and I think that's the tough part of it. You got a lot of ways you have to go here to make sure that you can get all this to mesh together, and that's why this tag makes sense. It doesn't necessarily kick the can down the road, but it gives you the opportunity to have more time to work all of these deals kind of in together.
Now, I know fans watching this are like, well, that's the job of the front office, is to take care of your star players. Take care of those 4 players, juggling them into, one group, like you said, one big pot of cash, and figuring out how you can keep all of them. World championship teams do that. Obviously, the most recent example, the Philadelphia Eagles. Look at the star players on that roster and how Howie Roseman, their general manager, was able to structure the rest of their roster around 4, 5, 6, 5-star players and make it work. I did find it interesting, Skinny, and I want to get your read on this. And I wonder how Bengal fans thought when they read this. And I forget where he said this, or I think he said it a couple of years ago. The question was asked, would you take one bad year if you had 4 really good ones? And he said, without a question, I would do that. And I just wonder sometimes, the Bengals haven't had, in the Joe Burrow era, throw out his first season, they haven't had a really bad year. They've been mediocre last 2 years. Their defense was way below average, and they finished 9-8, below and disappointing for sure. But they haven't had a losing season, and I just wonder what a Bengal fan thinks when they read that quote from a guy like Howie Roseman.
I'm with him in that regard. I mean, either you're at the top or you're at the bottom, because the bottom allows you to fix a lot of ills. Here's the thing, and Howie Roseman deserves a lot of plaudits for what he's done to build that roster. But the big difference is this, and why he can pay his stars, because they've hit on draft picks. They got guys on rookie contracts. The Bengals, on the other hand, this offseason alone have to at least go get 1 guard, maybe 2. They need to probably either re-sign Mike Gesicki or sign a tight end. They need an edge rusher. They need a tackle. They probably need a linebacker because they're going to likely cut Germaine Pratt. You may need at least one safety, possibly two. You can't do all of those things just in free agency. You got to eventually hit on picks, and Howie Roseman has done that. So while he gets the kudos of, well, he's paying his stars, yeah, he sure is, because they've hit on draft picks. The Bengals haven't hit on draft picks, so when they're paying their stars, the rest of their roster can be, in theory, crap because the draft picks haven't hit. This is a kind of an apples to oranges, but I thought about this today when I think it was Jerry Jones or Stephen Jones or one of the crazy Jones family talking about how they think they're still in a window to win a Super Bowl right away. And they pointed to, well, they've got the quarterback, they've got the wide receiver, they've got the pass rusher. And I went, who else has the quarterback and the wide receiver and the pass rusher? And didn't have much else other than that. They had some other parts, you know what I'm saying? And so does Dallas, but not many. And so, yeah, they paid their stars, but they haven't drafted well enough. And so that's part of this. I know every fan, it's easy to go, pay the guys. And I do believe they have the money to pay all these guys and actually even make some other improvements on top of it. But you can't just keep going to the well of pay all your stars and then have to fix the rest of the roster by going to free agency. It just doesn't work like that.
But I counter that, Skinny, by saying, well, you can't do nothing. You can't.
No, I didn't say that.
Pay your players and then not draft well. You've got to do what you've got to take care of. And I've said this to you before on this podcast. You've got to take care of what you're most certain of and then address the rest.
Okay, so that's where I'm at with T. I'm not certain. Okay. I'm not certain of his health going forward. That's the part that would scare. That's the part, if I'm the Bengals, that would give me pause in the negotiation process of, I don't know how much I'm going to get out of you because your injury history suggests you have soft tissue issues. It just isn't the last couple of years. Go all the way back to college. He's had these issues. And you're going to ask me to put a bunch of guaranteed money into a guy that I might get 10 games, 12 games, 11 games, 12 games. And he may be great for those 12 games, and he is. But, they don't just play 12 games. They used to play 12 games back in the 1960s, Mike, when you were watching football as a young lad. And I was watching football as a young lad. But they don't play 12 games anymore, man. They're about to play 18. And so I get it. And that's where, and all this, I know it. I get it as a fan. You want your dudes, but it's just more complex than just wanting your dudes. You have to look at all of the factors involved, including injury history. Again, I'm not telling you don't pay T. But like I said, if T's camp comes and says, we want north of $30 million on average value. And again, that's how everybody looks at it. You hear the 4 years, 120 mil, it's 30 mil. It's not that way. It's not structured that way, but that's the cute way to look at it. But there's also guarantees baked into that. And so, there has to be a price point where you just go, no, we can't go there. And I fully understand that. The other part, though, is if you are lowballing, if you're going, no, we think you're worth 22 mil a year. And he's clearly not. He's clearly worth more than that. Well, then shame on you if that's the case. And nobody knows where that stands at the moment.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's so hard to guess. And I will tell you that I haven't heard any rumblings of disgust out of the Tee Higgins camp. Certainly haven't read reports anywhere where they are, dismissing out of hand what the Bengals are offering or what they anticipate the negotiations will be going forward. He is Richard Skinny of Local12.com. Want to tell you about Prize Picks, the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions, that's billions with a B, of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. Just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. You heard that right. 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect, and God knows none of us are perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and yes, secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quickly as 15 minutes. And Prize Picks now offers MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this coming sports season. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Download the app today and use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download that app today and use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Back with Richard Skinner of Local12.com, covering all things Cincinnati Bengals. What did you make of the Germaine Pratt trade demand?
Yeah, I wrote a column last week about this, that if you can find the market for him, have at it. I'm only guessing, but this I think is a pretty educated guess. At least I hope it is. As you recall at Al Golden's press conference, he was asked, it might have even been by you, of, what do you make of the returning players on your roster? And he said, I'm about to do a deep dive into that to evaluate what guys. And my guess is word got back to Germaine of, you're not in the plans for this year, and you're probably going to be a cap casualty. So if you're Germaine, you get out in front of it and you say, okay, trade me. And so, but why would you want to be traded? Well, here's why. If he gets cut, and another team signs him, he's due to make 5.8 or 5.6. I don't have it in front of me. It's off the top of my head. It's one of the others. It's peanuts which way or the other this year. My guess is if he gets cut and somebody signs him as a free agent, he won't make 5.8 mil this year. So he's looking and saying, well, I want to make my 5.8. The only way I'm going to make it is not with this team because they're going to cut me. It's with somebody else. And so wise on his part. And again, if the Bengals can find a market, they were going to make Joe Mixon a cap casualty. In fact, I think there were some initial reports that they had, and then they found a trade partner in the Houston Texans and were able to pilfer a 7th-round pick, and it worked out for Joe Mixon because then he got his money and actually got an extension from the Texans. So yeah, if there's a market, have at it. Listen, Germaine was a very serviceable linebacker here since the time he came into the starting lineup as a rookie in 2019, midway through it. Made one of the more iconic plays in Bengals franchise history, the interception against the Raiders. And so he should be remembered fondly. But listen, your eyeballs last year would tell you whether you're a talent evaluator or not that he had lost a step clearly. If you believe in PFF grades, and I don't always believe entirely in them, but I think they're a nice measuring stick to at least give you something to look to analytically. He ranked 126th of 189 linebackers in overall grade. They had him for 20 missed tackles last year. Pro Football Reference had him for 18. So you look at a lot of analytics and stats and metrics. He's declining. And so I could see him being a clear cap casualty. My guess is word got back to him and he tried to get out in front of it. And I don't blame him. But like I said, if the Bengals can find a market, have at it.
Yeah, I mean, either way, whether he's a cap casualty or a trade pre June 1st or even post June 1st, it's $5.85 million in terms of cap savings to the Bengals, and the dead money is about $2.3 million. So essentially, do the Bengals value a 5th, 6th, or 7th round pick worth $2 million, right? I mean, that's essentially what, if you're the Bengals, that's the way you look at it financially, I assume.
Well, yeah, and again, I mean, you're just getting out from underneath it. So if you can get anything in return for that, let's not forget they also lost the 7th round, a 7th round pick in the Khalil Herbert trade. So you get something deep left. That's fine. It's something of value for a player you were going to let go anyway. That's where, again, the Joe Mixon, you were going to let him go anyway. And again, I get Germaine doing this, but I don't think he was in the plans. And who would know better than Al Golden, who coached him as linebackers coach in 2020 and 21, if he thought the guy had lost a step. My guess is he looked and went, yeah, we got to get younger and faster and better there.
Are the Bengals going to get younger and faster on defense, especially in the front seven, where, in my estimation, my humble layperson's view, they need their most pressing needs are in those two areas? Are they going to get that help from free agency, or are they more likely to get it from drafting really well? Something, both of us have, and everybody that follows the Bengals have been very hypercritical of their ability to draft and develop. But are they more likely to get it in the draft or free agency?
I think they need to dip into both waters, to be honest with you. Clearly you need an end opposite Trey Hendrickson. Let's just assume Trey Hendrickson gets extended. We'll just assume it, because if you lose Trey Hendrickson, even if you get some trade value in return for him, then you're looking to fill 2 defensive end spots, and that's a big, big ask. So let's just assume you're trying to fill 1 defensive end spot. So you need a younger guy and probably a veteran guy as a rotational piece. At defensive tackle, I think Chris Jenkins at this part of his career is nothing more than a rotational piece, but maybe he can be more than that. But again, draft another young guy, go sign a veteran guy. I think you'll see at least 4 new faces that can contribute on that defensive front this offseason, either through free agency or through the draft.
What's this time like for you as you monitor what the organization is doing leading up to late February, when we have the player combine in Indy?
It drives me crazy because there's just so much surmising, right? That's what it is. We're surmising a lot of things. Um, because there is the great unknown of not knowing figures and when is timelines for stuff going to be done. We could wake up on March 1st and T does sign a deal, right? I mean, we could be dealing with all this stuff come July. I mean, in late August or late April before the draft, and that's probably the decision time they got to do something with Trey Hendrickson if they're going to keep him and extend him or trade him. There's where you're going to get your value is prior to the draft and get something in return. Um, could that come on April the 9th or April the 14th? Can that come at 2:00 in the afternoon or 7:00 at night? It's just a weird time because this league beats to its own drum, if you will. I am interested next week. I know you'll be the combine as I will, Mike, to hear any further things from Duke Tobin and Zach Taylor on that front. We would both agree. I mean, I thought Duke was pretty darn honest with Kelsey Conway of the Inquirer when she interviewed him down at the Senior Bowl. I'm sure he'll get asked about the Tee Higgins cap or Tee Higgins franchise tag if it hasn't officially been done. Then, if they plan to do it, there's a lot of things he has to answer. I'm interested to see how truthful he is there to answer some of these things.
I know we've been down this path a million times, but do you think the team, if they really wanted to get the message out differently about the way they handle free agents, could undertake a PR campaign to be more aggressive with their front office than just having Duke talk every year at the combine? Because
Absolutely.
he's one of the rare GMs slash football executives that doesn't do a season wrap up and kind of assess what the year was like for the franchise.
Yeah, I think it creates more noise, and maybe they don't think it does, but I think it creates far more noise. It creates far more uncertainty. I think people just want some transparency, even if you don't like it, even if you don't like what the answer is of, listen, let's just say that the Tee Higgins stuff goes sideways of somebody simply saying, we've gone to a price we think is fair. We can't go any higher. Here's the problem. Whatever. I think that's all fine. Just give some level of transparency to where it doesn't always feel like you guys keep lowballing. Because here's all you hear across the league is the agent side of things, right? And they're going to paint the picture of they're screwing us. And sometimes they are. Again, don't get me wrong. Bengals management has deserved some of the, a ton of the negativity and criticism towards them. But it's not always that one-sided. It's just not. There's another side out there putting a figure out there that sometimes is unrealistic to reach. And again, just like in any business, you have to draw the line. Sometimes you make a wrong decision. They clearly made a wrong decision on Andrew Whitworth. They clearly made a wrong decision on Jesse Bates. I understood the Jesse Bates one more than the Andrew Whitworth, but at some point you make that, and then you have to either made the right decision, it's proven out, or you made the wrong. And then those are two places they made the wrong decision. But it's not always a one-sided thing of, pay this guy. You can't pay everybody, man. You just can't. You can pay a good chunk of them, but you can't pay them all.
What did you make of, speaking of communication, Trey Hendrickson at Super Bowl week, talking about how he heard from his father, I believe it was, about the contract negotiations and whether or not he would be offered something going forward. What did you make of all of that?
That's not that's the part that I think is the most frustrating. The line of communication is that bad, and it's interesting because if you go back to, I think they played it on 1530, an ESPN 1530, some snippets from Zach Taylor's initial press conference last week when he got hired, and talking about one of the big things he wanted to set was a line of communication and an open line of communication. And I think he's done that. I think we agree with it. He's done that with players, right?
From player to coach, I don't think there's any problem or any question that indeed he has done that. But he doesn't control. Troy.
No. My point is, he has done that, right? And it's proven to be fairly successful. It's been a pretty good locker room. Zach's done some good things, taking him to a Super Bowl, AFC champion. So that formula seems to be pretty good. How come the front office can't do that with players? And to that point where a dad has to say, I saw it on Twitter. I mean, you couldn't call the agent or talk to the player and tell him directly?
I don't understand that. And to me, it doesn't sound like good business. You would want your players informed. They're an employee, and any manager would want to let if they run a functional business and they want their employees engaged in what the team is trying to accomplish overall, you would want them engaged. You would want them informed, and you would want them feeling like, yeah, this is a place I want to be. Because when players want to be somewhere, they usually find a way to stay there. Or when employees have an excuse to stay somewhere, they usually will. Why is that? Because even in sports, change is not an easy thing to go through.
Yeah, and again, I know I've talked about cutting the front office a little slack because we don't really negotiate. But the one thing I will also say is this: I think, unfortunately for Katie and the front office, when it comes to contract negotiations, their main goal is to win the negotiation, not get a deal
Yes.
done that's fair to both. I think that's the part to me is they want to draw their line at a point and go, nope, we're not going there. And even if it could be done for a few million more, that doesn't completely take you all the way to where the players in Crazy Town or his agents in Crazy Town. I truly think their whole thing is, nope, we're going to squeeze it to the last nickel. That's where the cheapness comes in. If we're going to squeeze it to the last nickel where it's a win for us, not necessarily a win for the team and for the player. And that's a bad way to do things.
Well, and more to the point, that's why fans get frustrated and make the overarching assessment of the franchise that they're not serious enough, at least, about winning championships in Cincinnati. That's where fans get frustrated. And look, I'm speaking here for the fan base as a reporter, serving, you and me are conduits to the fans. The more, and we've always maintained this and insisted on this, the more information we get from front office people, from scouts, from coaches, and pass it on to fans, we provide the perspective. We are guessing, and I'm being totally honest here, total disclosure. We are guessing a lot of times when it comes to contract talks because all we have is the history of their behavior in the past.
Yeah, no doubt. And like I said, that's the unfortunate part. If that's their whole process of negotiating contracts is to win, and really the only time they kind of haven't won is with Joe Burrow when they realized they couldn't win that. We're never going to win that. And if they didn't make this work for him, that it would implode the whole city. And so that's one they couldn't win. We're never going to win. But it feels like almost every other negotiation process, it's all about how can we win this? How can we squeeze it to the last drop before, we get the player to take our deal? And man, I just don't think that's a good way to do things.
I'm going to wrap it up here, Skinny, but sometimes I think somebody should explain to the Blackburns, and maybe they're not even receptive.
They don't care.
Winning is not always about the dollar. It's about PR. And you can sometimes win a bigger battle in the long term, PR-wise. And I think I thought they may have seen that with Joe Burrow, because maybe they didn't win every single dime in the Joe Burrow deal, and maybe Burrow won that financially, but the Bengals came out looking like the winners from a PR perspective all around town because the Bengals were without question the number one franchise in the city after signing the biggest star the city has ever seen. If the Bengals would take that PR approach more often in cases like we're going to see in the offseason, I think it would behoove them, and I think they would get a lot more for their buck.
I'm with you. I that part I agree with, Mike. I truly believe that they're of the ilk of the city needs us more than we need the city, and maybe that's true. But I can just tell you in this whole lease thing that seems to be getting uglier by the day.
Yep.
If this house of cards comes in and folds on them with all these contracts in this upcoming season, they're going to lose every ounce of goodwill they've got from the 2021 season and on from a fan base perspective.
He is Richard Skinner, does a fabulous job covering the Cincinnati Bengals. He's proven that to me for all of the years I've known him. He certainly has proven it to his loyal fan base covering or following him on local12.com. You got anything else in the works?
No, I got a Reds baseball primer up just to get some Reds content up about. I know you're out there. That's why I wanted to touch on this. You're in Goodyear, Arizona. I am fascinated, Mike, to see how the infield situation shakes down. Like I could see scenarios of a day where Ellie starts at third, McLean starts at short, Luck starts at second, CES starts at first, and then a day when Ellie's back at short, McLean's back. I'm fascinated to see how Terry Francona makes this all work.
So it's interesting you bring that up, Skinny, because today out at Goodyear on the practice fields, they were actually, you know how in football you have the ones and the twos and the threes?
Yep.
Well, you had Ellie at short working with McLean. You had Santiago Espinal working with Gavin Lux, the backup second baseman. So you had your first team double play combo and your second team double play combo. You had Jamer Candelario at third, and you had Christian Encarnacion Strand at first. By the way, Christian Encarnacion Strand working with Mike Napoli very closely. He looks like he's in great shape, but he was scooping the ball really well. It should be fascinating to me.
I will tell you, I know his stock is low after what he did last year and with a minimal major league experience. If I could go buy stock in one player, and again, this might blow up in my face, I'd buy stock in Christian Encarnacion Strand having a big offensive year.
I'm telling you, Skinny, the ball sounds different off two bats in that camp. One is Ellie, the other is CES. When he lights into a ball, it sounds just totally different.
I'll bet.
Yeah. Well, he's Richard Skinner. I'm going to let him get back to basketball coaching and whatever else he's working on. He does a great job on local12.com. My name is Mike Petralia, Trags, and thanks for downloading this episode of the Jungle Roar podcast powered by CLNS Media and our terrific partners at Prize Picks. Until next time, keep that jungle roaring.